The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. This is Tahir Kapasi coming live from ACCA Middle East office. We're going to be talking on, or rather, I'm going to be uncovering the examiner's comments on financial management. Well, I say I'm going to be uncovering and be mindful of the word uncovering. When I say uncovering, we're not going to be going too much into details, but I'm going to be supporting or rather guiding you all with basically, sort of showing you insight, the giving you the key ideas, key tips, and the key points from your examiner's reports that have recently come out. This should hopefully be able to intrigue your interest in going in and looking into the detailed reports. Obviously each of these reports are sort of quite lengthy, and they're about 7 or 8 pages long, and I can't literally go and sit and take you through various different aspects of the report. The point of the session today, or rather the entire sort of series of sessions that we've been doing over the course of this week, is ideally to be able to give you the really key tips, the hints that examiners have tried to give you via these reports, and then perhaps complement or supplement them with some additional information that will help guide you in either your preparation for the relevant exam, or if you're thinking about sitting this exam in the next available exam session. So before we proceed, let's look at a few housekeeping rules. This is going to be a 1 hour session. Ideally, I will try and stick to the 1 hour time slot. If for any reasons we overgo the 1 hour slightly, we'll probably pardon me, and I'll try and keep to the time as much as I can. We will have a dedicated Q&A session at the end, so keep all your questions parked. In fact, if you would like to sort of start throwing them in while I'm still speaking and the slides are moving on the session, feel free to do that using the panel, the questions panel on the top left side of your screen. I will do all my best to attend all of your questions that come in towards the end. The slides obviously will move as I present. If you find that the slides are not moving, or if you don't hear my voice anymore, a good thing would be to sort of log out and log back into the webinar, and hopefully that should be able to resolve this issue for you. If you've still failed to do so, or if you've missed out on sort of attending to a certain part of this webinar, don't worry, we will have this available on demand for you on our social channels, as well as our dedicated Middle East landing page, which is www.accame.me. So without further ado, let's get cracking with today's session. What are we going to be looking at today? So I will give you a little bit of insight around your financial management exam, and take you through the exam structure and talk you through what the financial management exam ideally is about. We will then look at the 3 Ps, which we've developed in terms of supporting and guiding students through their planning and preparation through to passing stages. There are tips for you to be able to get started. I appreciate a lot of you might have already started and probably preparing to sit these exams in the upcoming exam session. However, there's also going to be some of you that are probably thinking about sitting this exam in the next available session, etc. So this particular section will be quite useful for those. There's also a section on what you should expect. Now, again, this is not going to be a set in stone thing where I'll be telling you these areas of the syllabus are important. Obviously the entire syllabus is important, but we'll give you a hint on what are the most commonly examined syllabus areas in your financial management exam. We will then go into the chunk of today's session, looking into the examiner's comments and what the examiners have tried to say to us within their approach article or within the reports that they produce every session. Finally, moving into steps to success, where we will share, I will sort of share a few things and a few hints and tips with you around the do's and don'ts of this exam, moving into Q&A before we close for the day. Right. So here's an overview of your financial management exam. And basically the aim of your financial management exam is to develop the knowledge and skills, that are expected of a finance manager or somebody who's working in the finance function, whether it is, investment, whether it is financing functions, dividend policy decisions, etc. The entire syllabus, if you look at the the image right here, is designed to equip candidates with the skills, that would be expected of a finance manager or a person who's, responsible for finance functions in organizations and in businesses. So from a rational point of view, your financial management exams basically build on the knowledge that is covered within the management accounting exam, and then it helps, if you carry that knowledge on to your strategic professional level exams, it helps you basically build on it and successfully pass your advanced financial management exam as well. If you're one of those students who, are probably exempted on the management accounting exam, I would suggest or highly recommend that you at least go and look into the syllabus or study guide documents of the management accounting exam, so you've got a bit of insight into what you can expect, when it comes to financial management, if not already done so. So ideally, financial management is all about, managing financing. So things like, how organizations manage their money, how they hedge risks, how, the working capital management, basically, how business finance works, investing, buying, etc. How do you source funds for an organization? Do you do that via equity? Do you do that via debt, etc.? So there's a whole host of things that are involved into, financial management as it is. The ACCA exam, and with the way it is structured, your financial management exam, it gives you a good insight into different things, around financial management. So if you like to see, it gives you a taster of, what to expect as a potential person who's wanting to work in the finance functions of an organization. So let's move on and look at the exam structure. The exam obviously consists of 100 marks, 3 sections. Section A will be your normal objective test questions worth 2 marks each. So you'll expect to see about 15 objective test questions on your section A. Section B, again, objective test questions worth 30 marks. The difference this time round will be, unlike section A, your section B questions will be based on 3 different cases, and basically you'll, so each of your case will be related to a specific syllabus areas, and you'll have 5 objective questions under each case or scenario. I mean, these will be short sort of scenarios and short cases, 5 related questions to that, and you'll be able to answer. Objective test questions, as you all might know from previous exam experiences, are your simple drag and drop, fill in the blanks, multiple choice, multiple response type questions. There's very dynamic questions where, you either get it right or you get it wrong. There is no midway about it. There's no way for you to be able to show your answers or your workings or anything like that. So you've got to be very specific. You've got to be on the point with your objective test question. Obviously, your section C is, worth 40 marks. Your longer form questions. These are basically usually, 2 scenarios or 2 questions with 1 or more requirements worth 20 marks each. Now, a good tip for some of you on, doing this exam, and when you're tackling the section A, section B, section C type questions. So with your objective test questions, it's always important to be able to read your questions carefully. Apart from that, think before you answer, because you've got to be very sure about what you want to do, because a mistake or an answer that is wrong, or even something like putting in a figure wrongly or transposing the figure by or putting the decimal incorrect, will make sure that you lose that marks, because there is either a right or a wrong with these answers. There's no midway, so the examiner will not be able to see that you follow through, your working is correct, etc. If it's not matching the right answer, you get no marks. So it's either full 2 or 0, one of the two. And basically answer all questions that you possibly can. On section A, section B, you should never leave out any questions blank. You're losing a chance. Try your luck out. If nothing, if you're still not sure, go with the obvious assumptions, go with the method of eliminating the obviously wrong answers, but put something down rather than just leaving that question blank. Who knows, you might end up nailing it on spot, and you might possibly get bag yourself that additional 2, 3, 4 marks, whatever you can get by answering that correctly. For your section C questions, you should ideally spend a little bit of time planning. And a lot of people sometimes say, well, time management is an issue for me. How do you? Well, that's the best thing about computer-based exams. Ever since we've moved our exams from paper-based to computer-based, and they're a lot different from the times when I used to do them previously. I've done my exams on an actual piece of paper, written through everything, and really crunched for time. If I've got something wrong, scribble everything, try and write the entire answer again. With computer-based exams, all of those issues have already been taken care of. You've got so much flexibility, and you end up saving a huge amount of time, especially on an exam like financial management. Imagine working through a spreadsheet. So if you have a spreadsheet in front of you, you don't even need to use a calculator. You can save so much time, doing calculations on a. I used to literally sit like this with my left hand on a calculator, my right hand writing, and I would calculate numbers, and I would keep writing with the right hand. And it used to be painful, really. So plan your answer pretty well on section C. Answer the requirements directly. So don't go around beating the bush. So just answer to the point. Keep it precise. Stick to the scenario. Most importantly, break your answer up with headings, with references. Show your workings quite clearly. That's also very important with your section C. Make sure that the marker can basically go in and look at your workings quite effectively. That also helps with getting you some marks. If you've got the main answer wrong, at least they'll be able to work through your workings and make sense of it. Your section C questions will mainly will be focused on areas around working capital management, your investment appraisal, sources of finance, business valuation, and risk management. So these are the 5 main areas, if you'd like to see in your syllabus, that will sort of heavily focus on your section C type question. But again, having said that, don't hold me for this. You might get an occasional odd question from here and there, but typically the trend is that these 5 areas are quite heavily examined for your section C type questions. Now, coming to our 3 Ps, which is again plan, prepare, and pass. I'll be very quick on this particular segment, because we will obviously be sharing the slides with you, and you'll have the opportunity to go through everything that you see on the screen now. So always when you're planning to sit these exams, and this is in the interest of those that are still thinking about sitting these financial management exams, you should ideally start with getting to know your exam. And how do you do that? By looking at the syllabus and study guides, looking at the past exams, specimen exam paper. At least give yourself an opportunity to familiarize with what is expected, how is the exam, etc. Most importantly, find yourself an appropriate study support. So don't sort of be a hero. Don't try and be like, oh, well, I can self-study this, I can do this because I've done XYZ qualification or whatever. We all need expert guidance. We all need expert support. We can hugely benefit from an expert tutor teaching us and guiding us through passing an exam. And it is proven statistically that you sort of increase your chances of passing an exam a lot more significantly if you're studying with an approved learning partner, or if you're using approved learning content. Drop a plan, have a plan of action, and then once you've done that, stick to it. A plan will give you that structure. It will help you, with being able to structure yourself, with being able to sort of have checkpoints, in order for you to be able to, see how you're progressing, etc. So make a plan, very important, and then stick to it once you've made it. And then again, work on your CBE skills. So for those of you that are not in employment, or have not had the practical experience on side of things, CBE skills, which is your computer-based exam skills, can be somewhat daunting. We've got a lot of resources on our website to support you with that. Again, this is not a huge, you don't have to be a spreadsheet pro or a word processor pro. As long as you've got the basics right, as long as your typing speed is decent, as long as you know how to use a spreadsheet, the different functionality, the different tools, you are fine, and you are all set to pass any ACCA exams. On the preparation stage, essentially you split them into learning, revision, and mock exam. Learning should always be about knowledge, knowledge, knowledge. You collect your knowledge via classes, attending tuition, you get all your notes, everything in order, do your fantastic mind maps, spider diagrams, whatever you want to make, carry those on into your revision phase where you glance through the key topics, and then you start practicing question, 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 question. On your revision phase, it should all be about practicing exam style question under exam conditions, timed as if you were actually sitting in an exam, and then you finish off by doing a mock exam or a practice test. You must at least do minimum of 2 mock exam before going into an actual exam. The mock exam will help you build, basically it'll help you build your confidence, it'll help boost your performance, and you'll be more prepared. Your mock exam is just, it's a trailer or a teaser, or it's a reflection of how well you're prepared to tackle your real exam. So ensure that you do a mock exam, ensure that your knowledge gaps are completely filled, and that you've managed your time properly. And you can only do that by practicing enough questions. When I say practice, actually practice them on a computer. Use our resources that are available on our website. I must admit, I've been a naughty boy this afternoon, and I've forgotten to send Helen, who's our co-host, the links that we usually keep sending out on these sessions. But you all are good students, I'm sure, and you know that where you can find all the study support resources. They're all available on www.acccaglobal.com. Under the Students tab, there is a dedicated section that says Study Support Resources. You click on that, you click on the ACCA qualification, and you click on the relevant exam that you are for which you want the resources for, and it gives you all the host of resources. So some of them which are quite crucial for you to use, especially in your practicing phase, is things like your constructed response workspace, CBE practice platform. These are all quite important. You should and you must, by all means, start practicing your questions using these platforms and resources. How do you begin? How do you get your exam or your preparation journey started? You review, basically, you start familiarizing. So this is the section around getting to know your exam. And how do you get to know your exam? Look at the syllabus and study guide, look at the examinable documents, scan through the specimen exam, look through some of the past exam papers. Also look at examining team guidance, because this is the guidance that the team will give you around, what was right, what was wrong, what should be an ideal strategy. If you imagine, this is almost as if you go into almost as if a strategy, you're building yourself a strategy where, if you walk into a room where you know what to expect, you're a lot better prepared compared to you walk into a room where you don't know what's in there, what to expect, and you basically take things as they come. So if you've gone through some of these things, it's almost as if you read your requirement before you read your actual scenario in the question. The same logic applies here, even in your preparation stage. Time and again, you'll hear every master tutor telling you, when you're sitting your exam, an effective strategy of answering and planning your answer is to first begin with reading your requirement. Once you've read your actual requirement, it's usually the statement that is in bold. There's a reason why we have it in bold on even on the question, is because we want to grab your attention subtly. We want you to be able to read that bit first, and once you've read the requirement, you know exactly what you want to get out of the scenario, so you don't end up wasting time first reading the scenario and then going back to the requirement, reading the requirement, going back to the scenario. Oh God, now I need to find and look for these things. Look at the examiner's report. Again, examiner's reports are fantastic options for you. They're great resources. They help you. They basically tell you what went wrong with previous exam sessions, where students made a mistake. Again, as a starter, if you're starting off new with that subject, it is always good for you to know what are the general and common mistakes students make with those exams. If you're somebody who's retaking that exam or repeating for any reason, it'll be good for you to be able to reflect on your previous performances and see where you might have gone wrong and what mistakes you would have probably made in your actual exam. There's a whole host of videos and a lot of different things available for you, especially with your financial management exam. You've got the formula sheet. You must start familiarizing yourself with the formula sheets as well. Now let's look at what should you be expecting for these exams. And again, a caveat here, this is not about what topics will come in a particular exam, or what you should focus more on, or where you should focus less on. This is just an indicative guide of, what kind of topics can you heavily expect to see in your actual financial management exam. As I said, the entire syllabus is fully examinable, and questions can come up from any part of the syllabus, especially on your section A and section B, because your section A, section B gives examiners the opportunity to bring in a lot of variety into your exam, so they can pick little bits from here and there, different parts of the syllabus, and try and examine you in different ways on your knowledge around, how equipped you are with all syllabus areas of the actual exam. So you need to be, sort of on the ball with every syllabus area. However, there are a couple of areas that get frequently examined, and in the case of in the case of your financial management exams, these would be these would be typically areas of financial management and financial environment. So on financial management and financial environment, the idea is basically for you to be able to familiarize around what happens, what is introducing you the financial management concept, financial environment. So this topic basically comprises of knowledge that must be retained and developed by you in terms of supporting you with answering all different, or understanding the next the entire syllabus, the entire area. Decisions have to be taken quite informed, in an informed way. You'll have to sort of take into consideration the ethical, environmental, and stakeholder concerns. So these are all the kind of things that get covered in your financial management function, as well as the business environment. You then have working capital management. Again, that is another crucial area of the financial management exam. Basically here, the nature, the elements, and the importance of working capital is sort of conveyed to you as a student. Management of inventories, accounts receivable, accounts payable, cash, etc. How much working capital is needed in funding different projects, etc. So this area will help you understand what working capital is, and how you can basically manage working capital of an organization. The third topic would be on your investment appraisal. Again, investment appraisal is all about different appraisal techniques, how you can allow for inflation or taxation in discounting cash flows, adjusting for sort of risk and uncertainty, as well as making those buying or investing or leasing decisions, or maybe decisions around replacing an asset and purchasing everything, capital rationing. So these are some of the key topics that would ideally be examined under the investment appraisal umbrella. Moving on, you have business finance. Again, with business finance, it is around how businesses source finance for projects, or for sustainability, or for research and development, or various different things. It's almost as if you try and think of this as a practical, from a practical standpoint, it's as if making realistic decisions, how we make decisions. So for example, I have certain apps which I know will give me certain discounts if I use that app, or go to a certain restaurant and use that app. I can save a certain amount of money there. I could maybe save some money, about 10%, by making payments at some places where I know I'm going to get a guaranteed 10% cash back on using my credit card. So it's almost as if organizations on a larger scale try and make these decisions, whether how do we finance business, how do we finance different projects, where do we get the money from, what are the different sources of money, should we issue more shares, should we sort of borrow from a bank, and basically estimating how much the cost of capital is going to be, what are the different costs of finance, how are we going to be structuring this capital, and some practical considerations. So these are the kind of things, and it's a very interesting topic, business finance. For those of you that are aspiring to sort of go into the broader stream of finance, and look into roles that can support you with different things. Business valuation being another key and important topic is quite crucial, where as a student in your financial management exam, it helps you understand the nature and the purpose of business valuations. What are the different, so you'll come across various different business models, and how basically those are used to value business. how can you do, value them via shares, valuing your business via financial assets or debts, etc. What are the practical considerations when, one organization is looking into buying another organization, acquiring or merging with them? These are really interesting concepts. Finally, another big topic on your financial management is around risk management. This is basically when it comes to finance, and when you think of risk, you can think of things like hedging, foreign exchange differences, fluctuation in forex rates, the nature and different types of risks basically, and how organizations on a broader scale manage these risks. Now, what do you think happens with the prices of crude oil moving? Do you think, what is the concept of hedging? How do organizations lock in, these exchange rate differences? Again, this is a very, very interesting part of financial management, and it's quite interesting and intriguing if you've got an interest for, understanding the nature of these things. And the way you understand this subject better is by having a more practical outlook for it. So, if you want to sort of keep yourself updated, you can use a few, keep yourself updated by following the news, following what is happening in the finance, or read up the Economic Times or the Financial Times, or simply download this app which I use. Basically, it's called Finimize, Finimize. Fantastic app. Again, gives you sort of bite-sized chunks of information relating to finance and what's happening in the finance world. What are the major movements and why this is going to be affecting a couple of things, etc. So do keep yourself updated. And then Black and Scholes option pricing model, again, very important. Will definitely help you if you decide to take your advanced financial management exam. I know Black Scholes option pricing was a compulsory question, 50 marker compulsory question when I did my advanced financial management exam donkeys years ago. I don't even remember when I sat that exam, but this was the very first section A compulsory 50-mark question. And to my good luck or bad luck, I don't know what, but I had the most difficult version of this question because it was on real life options. So that's a challenging concept, by the way. I don't want to get there, but this is again an important topic that generally tends to get examined by the examiner. Let's now begin looking at the examiner's comments. Like I said earlier, the examiner's comments are all about giving you the pluses and minuses, equipping you with where students generally tend to make mistakes, and then perhaps giving you an opportunity to sort of learn from those mistakes and build on them. Again, I would like to re-emphasize that the examiner's comments are quite lengthy and they've got a lot of information in depth and in greater detail. Unfortunately, owing to the time and because it's just an hour on this session, I will not be able to take you through the entire report in detail. But what I'm hoping that you guys will do after listening to this session today is probably go online, go on our website, under the study support resources section, go into the examining team guidance. You'll find all the examiner's reports there. You start looking at some of the most recent examiner's report. What I'm going to be covering today is basically extracts from the March 20 exam as well as the December 19 exams and the examiner's report and what they thought about those exams and students' performances. So let's start looking at the general comments first. Now, in your general comments, the examiner has basically said that students tend to perform better with narrative than calculations. And again, why this might probably be happening, especially in the context of your section A and section B, is because you don't have the opportunity of showing your working, so you don't get to sort of showcase. So even if you've made a typo error, or even if you've made a mistake with probably one figure in a NPV or an IRR figure, you tend to get that bit wrong because you've probably made an error, you've transposed a figure or something of that sort has happened, which is why the examiners have generally noticed that the narrative side of questions are a bit better. Students perform a bit better on them than compared to the calculations. You've got to be able to familiarize yourself with the formula sheet. Again, you will be provided the formula sheet in the exam, but that doesn't mean that you completely relax and you forget all about it. You must by all means and you would have already started incorporating this practice when you on your revision phase start practicing question. And that's why I emphasize enough on the point that you need to start practicing questions, and you need to start practicing them as if you were doing an actual exam. So when you start doing an actual exam, you'll start using the formula sheets, you'll start obviously familiarizing yourself. All of those discount and annuity factor tables would have obviously been on your when I remember when I was doing my financial management exam, some of those figures really were on my on the top of my mind, at the tip of my tongue, and I didn't even need to look at those tables, to be honest, because that many exams, that many questions you end up practicing. And this is again particularly very important in the longer cost of capital or working capital NPV calculation. So if you're updated with your knowledge, if you're updated with your figures and all of that, again it helps you with being able to calculate really quickly, do your calculations on a calculator. Ideally you should not be using a calculator, because if you had a spreadsheet, but for section A, section B, you'll need to be using your calculation, your calculator as well. Knowing your application of the discount and annuity factor tables accurately is again important. I've already covered that point previously. You must by all means study the entire syllabus, especially examiners have found that there is huge amount of knowledge gaps on section A, section B type questions, because that's where they sort of tend to examine you on a wider syllabus topics. And it becomes very evident when students tend to underperform on certain topics, etc. So you must by all means study the entire syllabus. You should practice past exam questions to time. Again, examiner has specifically included this point in their general comments, because they've seen a lot of times students lack that practicing that question, especially with your financial management exam. It is so much more important when you're using the word processing or the spreadsheet functionality in your exam. You can only master it, or you can only master it by practicing. If you've done enough practice, you will not struggle on the day of the exam. Time management becomes difficult if you've not practiced at all, or if you've practiced questions on a piece of paper but not on the actual exam platform or the system that is used. Then you will struggle, obviously, and then it's quite evident. Examiners or markers can see that in the way you've done your exam. I mean, next point around including and labeling workings correctly is also again very, very important. If you've done your labeling and if you've done your workings, and most importantly in your section C type questions, if you show your workings on the spreadsheet, it's more important, because we've got the own figure rule. And by the own figure rule, even if you've done a mistake or there's a calculation error, or you've mucked up with one or two numbers in your NPV, or you've started off incorrectly, at least the marker will be able to see the rationale behind your working, and then they'll be able to give you some marks. So instead of what students generally tend to do is they do the calculation on a calculator and they just type the numbers on the cells in the spreadsheet. You must by all means avoid that, because the examiner or the marker does not see what you did on a calculator, because it's not there. All they can see is the figure that you put on your cell, and if that figure is incorrect for any reason, then they don't see the rationale behind, and they can't offer you that half a mark or 1 mark for the attempt, or for being able to do justifiably do your working. So by all means, please include all your workings in the actual spreadsheet, in the answer on a side somewhere, rather than just doing them on a calculator or on a piece of paper at the side. Another important comment around reading your questions carefully, very important. You must start reading your questions carefully. You must understand the requirement before you jump on the conclusion and you start answering and you start dumping all the knowledge you have around that topic in the exam. Section A, some crucial points. Again, Section A, not a huge challenge, but typically the examiners have noticed that students are not aware of the entire syllabus. It's quite evident that you students tend to leave sometimes gaps, and they tend to underperform on certain areas, which just shows that they've not sufficiently covered the syllabus in that much of that. So knowing the entire syllabus is quite important. Lack of practice, particularly objective test questions. Again, the examiner has picked up on this point that students don't practice enough objective test questions. Now you'll say, where do we get the opportunity to practice this? Again, your tuition provider should be able to support you with that. We on ACCA's website have got a couple of specimen exams. We've got a couple of past exam papers. We've also got there should be on the CB practice platform, we've got a few questions for you to be able to practice. So there's enough opportunity out there for you to be able to practice these type of questions, so that you're more updated and you're more hands-on with answering or being able to answer objective test questions. Again, a lot of times students sort of tend to make silly mistakes. They make the calculation errors, etc. They get some of their answers wrong, and because the marker cannot see your working or anything, or your logic behind that answer, they can't give you. And again, with objective testing, you either get the full mark or you get no mark. So it's quite a bit of a challenge, which can only be overcome by practicing. um, Examiners have also observed that students tend to spend a lot of time on section A usually, and they waste a lot of time spending on section A, and then that shortfall on time is shown, or is has an impact on, particularly on section B, section C type questions. So you must by all means manage your time correctly. Sometimes I get questions from students around, well, what should be the right strategy? Should we start with section A? Should we start with section B? Should we start off with section C, etc.? I mean, this can obviously differ from tutor to tutor in their advice, as well as student to student in their practice. What I generally end up recommending to students is you're better off starting with section B type questions, because you know that there are three specific scenarios. Each scenario will be on one particular area, or at the most two sort of areas of the syllabus, usually generally only one. And all the five objective questions that you have underneath that scenario will all be related to the same area of the syllabus. So you'd be able to focus, you'd be able to answer them a lot quickly. And then you move on to section C, you complete your two long form questions, you spend in proper time in planning and constructing proper answers on section C, and then eventually you come back to section A, where you then start thinking about the wider syllabus, and then you start answering questions from that context. As I mentioned earlier, again, the examiner also highlights that there are several challenges with errors on calculations, particularly on section C. It is evidently noticed that students tend to make a lot of mistakes in being able to calculate, and when doing their calculations on a calculator and the workings on a piece of paper, sometimes you make errors, sometimes you transpose figures. You've got to be very careful when you're doing section A, section B type questions, because if you get a single digit wrong there, then your answer is wrong, and you've completely lost those marks, and that you could have easily gotten. So try and be very cautious, try and be very sort of observant when you're doing your section A and section B, particularly your objective test questions. Right, now let's look into your section B, and typically what gets covered, and what are the general observations by the examiner around section B type questions and students' performances on section B. So one of the first and the very sort of recurring comment by examiners are usually read the question carefully and follow the instructions. So students should, you guys should always aim to read the question carefully, and follow all the instructions on how to answer the question. So for example, I mean, giving you a typical example, if the question asks you to select, two correct statements, and this is again on your objective test question side, you will only get the marks if you've selected two correct statements. Sometimes in a rush, what students tend to do is they only select one correct statement, and they move on without reading. If it's saying two correct statements, you have to sort of identify and then select two. If you select two and the two of those are correct, you get the full marks. If you select one, even if that one is correct, you don't get full or partial marks, because the question asks you to select two. If you select three, because that sort of a question will be a multiple response question, so if you end up selecting three and two out of those three options are correct, you still get no marks, because you were specifically asked to select only two statements. Well, the examiner's report, for financial management, the recent one, has said that there is a lot of students have been making these mistakes, and then there are no partial marking available when it comes to objective test questions. So reading and understanding the question is as crucial as it could be for students to be able to successfully answer section B type questions. Dealing with numerical questions, students have been asked, so be observant, when answering number entry questions specifically, you've got to understand, and you need to ensure that you're answering the question in the correct format. Sometimes, especially in your section B type question, you will have if your answer is supposed to be in millions, you will have a million and then a dollar sign on top, which then just means that if your answer is, for example, 1.3 million, then you've just got to put 1.3 in that particular box, or fill in the blocks, rather than putting 1300000 n number of zeros. So you've got to be careful there. You've got to be observing. You've got to see if the units have been given. If they've been given, then you've only got, sometimes you will find a dollar sign with three zeros, which means if you've got your answers in thousands, then you just put the integer around that, and you don't end up putting the entire long, or if you don't end up putting your decimal places here and there, because if you do that, again, you'll end up getting no marks for that question. So you've got to be very careful when dealing with section B or dealing with objective test question. You've got to be observant. With working capital, again, unable to correctly calculate the cost of effects, or the cost that effects of introducing accounts receivable or factoring or offering an early settlement discount. Again, this is another area where students sort of tend to find themselves severely challenged. When students have been asked questions around working capital, a company's position of working capital, that led to significant changes, or even concepts around early settlement discount, how these would sort of increase the length of the operating cycle, etc. These are the fundamental areas where students tend to make mistakes around working capital. So when you're ideally preparing for your exams and you're going through the working capital segment or section, you should try and focus on some of these mistakes that students end up commonly making. On your business finance side, it is generally noted that candidates are not very clear with the basics. They tend to make some mistakes around how the business finance work, or the different types of understanding the different types of business finance. Some students make errors on a question where dilution of earning per share is needed. Again, that concept is not very clear. If it should be financed by a rights issue, or a debt, etc. So when you're studying business finance, you need to make sure that you've got your concepts clear. You understand basically what are the different sources of finance firstly, and what are the different considerations or points to consider under each one of those sources of finance. Business valuation, again, the examiner has said there's a sheer lack of understanding around how shares are valued, how earning yields are calculated, also having calculations around asset based valuation. This is all because of the lack of understanding of the topic. You need to, when you're studying, You just don't need to study on the surface. You need to go into the depths of this, challenge thing, look at the practicality, how shares can be valued, what are the techniques that organizations use in valuing these shares, how asset-based calculations are done in valuing sort of the business, in terms of how much is the worth of a business, how much is what is the fair price, if they've got cash, etc., if they've got certain assets, what is going to be the value of this asset in the near future, etc. Excuse me. Risk management, again, there are continuous challenges, and this area particularly seems to be a bit, it sticks out when it comes to students being challenged, because normally the students find derivatives, exchange rate contracts, forward rate agreements, etc., slightly challenging. And because there is not a huge focus around so questions that can come around these topics usually would be around 10 marks at most, in an exam. Students tend to oversee these, but again, it's a very important topic, and as students, you should definitely focus on risk management, on your hedging techniques, your options, your futures, your derivatives, and all of that. It's quite crucial for students to be able to understand these concepts. Looking at section C, the examiners, they've identified some inefficiencies, usually with being able to read the scenario, or even if you've read the scenario, students tend to dump a lot of knowledge, rather than answering the questions. So when you're reading the scenario-based question, ideally the strategy should be reading by, you must by all means start by reading the requirement first. Once you've read the requirement, then go and read the scenario, highlight the important bits that you need, the information that you will need from the scenario, and then when you start planning your answer, you keep it very relevant. I mean, it is quite intimidating, and you might be very much tempted to sort of dump everything that you know about a subject that you're more sort of confident with in an exam, but you must recognize that this kind of practice will not get you any more marks than you possibly can. So try and keep it relevant as much as you possibly can. The examiner has also commented, said that there's a lack of depth and understanding of topics, so students tend to have poor understanding of a few topics. They don't go into the knowledge that much, where they tend to sort of build a few poor narrative answers. This can only be overcome by practicing enough questions. So we know that some of the most tested topics on section C are topics around working capital management, or investment appraisal, business finance, or business valuation and risk management. So as students, you need to have complete in-depth knowledge of these subjects for you to be able to answer your questions more objectively and keep it very much relevant to the scenario. The examiners usually give detailed explanations in their reports, where you can go into each of these syllabus areas in detail, and there's pages of information around where students make mistakes with working capital management, or what are the common mistakes students make around investment appraisal. So do go into the examiner's reports for at least the last two sessions, as well as the same session last year, if you're sitting the September exam, and have a look and see what the examiners have said in depth about certain exam areas. Another point the examiner has recognized on section C is students not being able to show their workings or answers within cells correctly. I've mentioned this earlier. We've got this own figure rule, whereby if you've shown your workings on a question, your marker will be at least be able to give you some marks, rather than seeing an incorrect entry of answer on the spreadsheet and not knowing exactly how you derived or come to that answer. So always a good practice to show your workings within the spreadsheet, and also possibly try and show the formulae within each cell. Working should be shown in order of method marks. So you should be able to show your workings in a way where methodical marks can be given to you easily. So that's one way how you'll be able to present your answers neatly, as well as you'll be able to grab those easy marks. So when you do your longer NPV IRR calculations, it becomes a lot easier if you've listed them in an order. And then again, working on your spreadsheet and word processing techniques is equally important. So financial management exam is a number driven, sort of number and narrative. It's a mix, and you will, at most of the times, you will tend to have spreadsheets maximum times in order for you to be able to answer your questions on the section C. So you being quite sort of on the ball, and having spreadsheet tools and spreadsheet skills handy will definitely come to hand. Did you know you can even use the NPV IRR advanced formulas on the exam, and you can come to the NPV IRR in like a couple of seconds, and then you just copy paste and you change a few numbers here and there, the years, etc., and you can save so much time. So get yourself updated on your spreadsheet knowledge, and I'm not saying you've got to be a whiz kid with being able to use spreadsheet, but try and learn the basics. Try and learn how you can use formulas, complex formulas, advanced formulas, and that will really help you with your exam technique, will help you with your efficiency, and invariably help you in your career in the future, where you're hired and you're needed to require spreadsheet in a more complex manner. So I'll just take a quick moment. We've seen the examiner's comments. We've seen some of the, common pitfalls that students sort of tend to make, or mistakes that students tend to make on the financial management exam. In the next coming slides, we will look at a couple of ways that, you can, or a couple of dodges, if you'd like to say, on how you can avoid making some common mistakes in an exam. So again, when you're doing your financial management exam, try and avoid making these mistakes. These are hugely, very common, and a lot of students end up making these mistakes. So incorrectly placing initial investment at year 1 rather than year 0. Remember, always, whenever you're thinking around initial investment, NPV calculations, etc., you start with year 0, moving on to year 1, year 2, year 3, depending on the number of years the expected. Again, inflating relevant cash flows incorrectly. Students always make this mistake. They tend to make an error on being able to consider inflation into their cash flows, and they also tend to make a mistake with the years. Deflating instead of inflating sometimes is also a very, very common error that students tend to make. Not placing tax related cash flow 1 year in errors, big mistake, very common. Students always tend to make this error when they're doing the financial management exam. Omitting the tax related cash flows in year 5. Must remember always, omitting tax related cash flow in year 5, quite a crucial adjustment. Adding tax allowable depreciation benefits before calculating tax liabilities. Discounting nominal cash flows with calculated real discount rate. Now, very important, these are the basics of your NPV calculations, the basics of these discounts, and you must by all means take these points into consideration. Again, not being able to justify financial acceptability comments by referring to NPV decision rules. So you must, generally when students do their NPV calculations, they're favorable, unfavorable, they tend to sort of follow that up with a proper justification. You must be able to justify reasons for your observations, and that's quite crucial. Generally you have a mix of marks. So if it's a 5-mark requirement, there'll be 2 marks for calculating your NPV, and probably 3 marks for your comments and your judgment. So always follow it up with your comments. It's absolutely crucial, and you should definitely avoid making these kind of mistakes, because you end up losing those easy marks that you possibly can get. Some expert guidance. So do not forget to make a recommendation along with your NPV calculation. This is what I said previously. It's an easy mark for you to pocket whenever you have an NPV questions are always examined in the financial management exam. You must know that if you've done this exam previously, or if you've solved relevant past exam papers. IRR and WACC, weighted average cost of capital, are equally important areas of the exam. they get examined pretty much every time. So you ensure that you work out balancing allowances, charges on long-lived assets for tax purposes, as well as cash flows that are associated with with movements or invest movements in investments. Again, movements in investments on working capital, these are all quite crucial, and you should be able to sort of focus on these and not miss those important crucial marks. The golden rule of discounting is to use like with like. Well, you should be able to ideally understand the difference between real and nominal cash flows, and sometimes students tend to confuse these quite often, and you need to understand, firstly be able to understand the difference between the real cash flow and a nominal cash flow, and then accordingly use the correct discount rate. You should be hands-on with this. The only way you can get better at this is by practicing exam style questions. And again, the process of using a comparable company equity, so beta, so when you have the business valuation questions, being able to compare the equity beta, and then de-gearing and re-gearing concepts are quite examined quite heavily, and this should you should be practicing these in your exam type questions when you're in your revision stages. So it's again a very important concept. You need to keep enough practice on this, because these are some of the very regularly examined features, and you always end up getting a question on this in your actual exam. So, conscious of time here, I want to be able to leave enough time for Q&As, because I know you guys will definitely have a lot of questions for me. Just summarizing everything that I've said so far, ensure that you go through your examiner's comments each time you prepare for a new exam. It's absolutely crucial. These are fantastic resources, and you must by all means know where people generally tend to make mistakes, so you can avoid easily making those same mistakes or repeating them. Understanding the examiner's point of view and then incorporating those things in your exam practice enhances your scores. Make use of the study support resources on ACCA website. I've said to you already, they're all available on www.accglobal.com under the students tab, within the study support resources. Some of the most crucial resources, I would say, there's loads of them, but I'd say the examining theme guidance, the examiner's reports and articles, the constructive response workspace, the CBE practice platform. These are absolute crucial, absolute must for you to be able to use. The practice platform will give you an opportunity to sort of practice questions on the exam environment, and so will the constructive response workspace. There's a lot of content out there available for you. You've got the approved content material, you've got the ACCA practice test on the practice platform. So make the most of this. Use these crucial resources, because they're all built in there for your own benefit. Now, this brings us nicely to our question and answer session. I'm just trying to look at the questions panel to see. Well, I'm sure a lot of questions have come in. Yes, and I can see already quite a lot of questions have started coming in. I will be attempting to answer these as I go. I can see my colleague Helen has already answered a couple of your questions. So one of the first by Manasa is, due to Corona, I have not got my books. So is accountancy.com notes reliable? Manasa, this is a very subjective question. Now, I always have had my doubts around anything that is available for free or any resource that's available for free. I have personally not gone through the accountancy.com notes in detail, but I can certainly tell from the surface that nothing can compare to approved content providers, because we know, and we've gone through the quality, we've gone through the assurance page, so we know that the approved content providers have covered the learning outcomes sufficiently, and if students follow that, they'll be able to successfully pass their exams, because everything, all the aspects on knowledge have been successfully covered there. There's a question from Iola. Is there any order of taking the exam papers? Iola, yes, I mean there isn't a very specified order of taking papers, but something that we usually end up recommending our students is once you're in your applied skills space, you try and ideally do, and again depending on where you enter the qualification from, in terms of your journey. I mean, if you've got the first three papers exempted, then it's pretty much an open ground for you. So typically, students tend to do the tax exam first, or the financial reporting, because again it's complementing. If you're passing out from the applied knowledge levels, and if you've done the financial accounting, management accounting exams, then you're on a good track with continuing with doing your financial reporting exam first, taxation, do your auditing exam, do your performance management, then and then your financial management. There is a bit of overlap on performance management and financial management also. So always try and keep your performance management exam before you've done the financial management exam, because there's an underlying principle, and there's guiding knowledge that will be quite handy when you do your financial management exams. Moving on to your strategic professional, again, your essentials are important. So definitely, by all means, you should start with your essentials. So it's up to you how you feel comfortable, or what subject you feel a bit more comfortable with. You can either choose to do the SPL first, or if you're comfortable with the SPR, you can start off with the SPR first, followed by the SPL. One piece of advice, again, for all students is, before you go on to your strategic professional exams, you must ensure that you've done your ethics and professional skills module. It's quite a crucial sort of component of the qualification, as well as it'll give you, or it'll set you up very well for your strategic professional level exams, because there's a bit of overlap on the content, and it'll very nicely set the scene for you. Right, next question by Muhammad. Was the Black Scholes option price model recently included in the FM syllabus, and if so, could you give me a gist of it? Well, Muhammad, this has been an area which has always existed in the financial management exam, and if I had these in my exams, back in the days, this was years and years ago. It's definitely there. So I would recommend you picking up the syllabus and study guide, and then having a look through it, and going through it in greater detail. Right. Next question from Manasa again is around, so can we do the calculation in the FX part, and as they select the amount, it'll show our calculation? So Manasa, I mean, this is what I understand from your question. Can we do the calculation on the foreign exchange part, and then when we select the amount, it'll show our calculation? So basically, I think you're trying to ask around the spreadsheet skills, and if you did your calculations on a cell in a spreadsheet, and when you use formulas, it'll pick up the correct calculation and the correct answer. So the answer to this question is yes. I mean, if you've got a spreadsheet, you should not be able to, there's absolutely no need to be able to use a calculator. There is a question by Zainab. Is the book going to be same after June 2020? So Zainab, yes, there will be slight changes. So because we update our syllabuses every year in September, every year in June ideally. So September session is the session where you have the first examination with the new syllabus. What I would suggest is, we on the financial management, we don't generally tend to make a lot of major changes. So you can refer to our syllabus and study, sorry, our syllabus guide, which is on the website. It will give you an indication of basically what are the changes on financial management, or what are the changes on different examinations from. But if you're concerned around the book, or if you're concerned how valid the material is, don't need to worry a lot, as long as you've gone through the changes that are the new upcoming changes, and there's always supplementing material available for you to be able to update yourself. Right. Any other questions? Yes, there's one question from Kothar. How many times should I organize for each section A, B, and C? Apologies, Kothar. How many time should I organize for each section A, B, and C? My apologies. I can't understand what you're trying to ask me, but ideally, if this is around the order of taking an exam, then like I said, this can obviously be varied from tutor to tutor, student to student. It's quite a preferential thing, but I would generally advise a student to do section B first, followed by section C, and then finally section A. Zainab, you've asked a question. I want the link to the resources so I can practice more. Zainab, my apologies. We've not been able to send the link across here, but I can guide you to how you can get to the resources. So you type www.acccaglobal.com on your web browser, and then you go onto ACCA's website. On ACCA's website, there is a section that is specifically for students. There are various sections. You'll see, one of them will be for members, one of them will be for qualifications, etc. There's going to be one for students on the side. If you click on that, you'll get a drop down list, and that drop down, within that drop down list, there'll be study support resources. So if you click on study support resources, select ACCA qualification, and then click financial management exam, all the resources available are going to be in front of you.
Hi Tahir, just to let you know, I've copied most of the links into the chat box, so if they scroll up, they can find them all there.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Helen, for doing that. So Helen has very graciously, copied in all these links. So thanks. That's what, sort of working as a team means. And so if you've got any doubts, or if you want specific links to resources, then, scroll up your chat box and you'll find all of those there as well. One final question, when can we get the examiner's comments? Mohammed, again, these are all available on the ACCA's website, and they're all available for you for free. I am confident Helen has also posted a link to the examiner's comments on the chat section. They are, as always, available under the Student Study Support resources on ACCA's website. Even if you were not sure where to find them, we have a search bar. I mean, you just type it in the search bar on our website and everything will come up almost instantaneously. So go in and make the most of these resources. I see there are no more questions that are there from your side, which nicely brings me to this slide where we can share, gives us the opportunity to share some of the details, which asks you if you've got any relevant questions. This is our email. You can reach out to us on educationme@accaglobal.com with any technical or specific questions. You can also follow us on our social media channels on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. We are by ACCA Middle East, to keep yourselves updated and catch up on these sessions if you would like to visit them again. These are also going to be hosted on our dedicated Middle East hub page, which is www.accame.me. So feel free to log into and sort of engage with these pages as well. With this, I would now nicely like to wrap up today's session. And then firstly, thank you all for your time in being able to attend this session. And also want to take this opportunity to wish all of you good luck for your upcoming exam sessions, and take care until I speak to you again. Thank you, everyone.